Sham Sharadava Nalalida Loka Tranaya Karuna Gana Ghanatvam Sham Sharadava Nalalida Loka Tranaya Karuna Gana Ganatam Praptasya Kalyanam Gurnanavasya Bande Gura Shri Charanara Vrindam Praptasya Kalyanam Gurnanavasya Bande Gura Shri Vande Guru Shri Charanara Vrinda Vande Guru Shri Charanara Vrinda Vande Guru Shri Charanara Ma Prabhu Ki Tana Nritya Gita Vaditra Madhyam Manasura Sena Ma Prabhu Ki Gita Vaditra Madhyam Romanchakam Pasru Taranga Bhajo Bande Guru Shri Charanara Vrindam Shri Vigrahara Dhana Nityanana Shingara Tanma Nirama Janado Juktasya Bhaktamsa Niyunjatapi Bande Guru Shri Charanara Vrindam Chaturvidha Shri Bhagavat Prasada Swatana Triptan Hari Bhakta Shanghan Chaturvidha Shri Bhagavat Prasada Kridvaiva Tripte Bhajata Shadeva Vande Guru Shri Charanara Vrindam Bhajata Shadeva Vande Shiradikama Prabhayara Para Madhurya Leela Gunarupa Namna Shri Radhikama Prabhayara Para Madhurya Leela Pratikshana Swa Tanalalupasya Bande Guru Shri Charanara Vrindam Ne kunjayono rati keli siddhai jayali bhirjokte apekshaniya ne kunjayono rati keli siddhai jayali bhirjokte tatrati daksha ativalavasya Vande Guru Shri Charanara Vrindam सच्चाधरित्वेन समस्तशास्त्रे उक्तास्तथा भव्यतैव साधुभिः सच्चाधरित्वेन समस्तशास्त्रे किन्तु प्रभोर्ज प्रिय एव तस्य वन्दे गुरो श्री चरणरविन्द यस्य प्रसाद भगवत् प्रसाद यस्य प्रसादं न गति कुतपि यस्य ध्यायां स्तुवां तस्य यशस्त्रिं सन्ध्यां वन्दे गुरो श्री चरणरविन्दं ध्यायां स्तुवां तस्य यशस्त्रिं सन्ध्यां वन्दे गुरो श्री ध्यायां स्तुवां तस्य यशस्त्रिं सन्ध्यां वन्दे गुरो श्री चरणरविन्दं Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamini Namine Nama Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pachattari Shatarine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pachattari Shatar Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda Shri Advaita Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Shishi Radha, Nila Madhava Radha, Nila Madhava Radhe, Shishi Radha, Damodara, Radha Damodara, Radhe, Shishi Radha Damodara ki jai. Let me give you the key.
Namami Swaram Shachita Anandarupam Lasat Kundalam Gokule Brajamanam Yasoda Biyolu Khela Davamanam Brahmarashtam Mattanto Duryota Gopa Rudhantam Muhurnetra Yugmam Arjantam Karam Bhoja Yugmena Stanka Netram Muswasa Kampa Trireka Kanta Stita Grevam Damodaram Bhakti Badam Iti Dark Savlila Bir Ananda Kunde Sav Gosam Nimajantam Akhyapayantam Tadiye Sitageshu Bhaktirjita Tvam Punya Prematastam Satavarti Vande मोक्षं न मोक्षं वदिं वा न चान्यं वर्णेऽहं वरेशादपि या इदं ते वा पूर्णात् गोपालबालं सदा मे मनसे अविरस्तं किमन्ये इदं ते मुखं भोजं हस्तन्ते नीले वर्तं कुण्ठलया स्निग्धा रक्ताश्च गोका मुचुम्बितं बिम्बरक्तादरं मे मनसे अविरस्तं अलं लक्ष्यलभे दामोदरन्त विष्णो पर्षिदा पर्वो दुःख जलाधिमग्नम् कृपा दृष्टि वर्षति दीनां बतानो ग्रहेणा समामज्ञां दियक्षि दृश्ये कुबेरात्मा जो बदा मूर्ते ये अद्वैत तव मूर्छितो भक्ति भाजो करतो जा तथा प्रेम भक्तिं स्वकाम्ये प्रेक्षा न मोक्षाग्रेहो मे स्थिदामोदरेया नमस्तेस्तु धाम्ने स्पृहदीप्तिधाम्ने तदियोदयथ विश्वासो दाम्ने नमो राधिकाय त्विदाय प्रियाय नमो नन्तलीलाय देवाय तुभ्यम् नमो राधिकाय त्विदाय प्रियाय नमो नन्तलीलाय देवाय तुभ्यम् Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jayo Radha Damodar Radha Damodar Radhe. Jayo Radha Damodar Radha Damodar Radhe. Jayo Radha Nila Madhav Radha Nila Madhav Radhe. Jayo Vrindavan Dham Jayo Vrindavan Dham Vrindavan Dham Jayo Vrindavan Dham. Jayo Krishna Balaram Krishna Balaram Krishna Balaram Jayo Krishna Balaram. Jayo Jagannath Jayo Baladeva Jayo Subhadra Jayo Sudarshan. Jayo Sita Ram Lakshman Bhakta Hanuman Sita Ram Jayo Bhakta Hanuman. Jayo Lakshmi Narashima Jayo Lakshmi Narashima Lakshmi Narashima Jayo Lakshmi Narashima. Jayo Gauranitai Jayo Gauranitai Gauranitai Jayo Gauranitai. Jayo Jayo Prabhupada 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 Jayo Jayo Prabhupada. Jayo Jayo Gurudev 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 Jayo Jayo Gurudev. श्री श्री राधा दामोदर भगवान की
जय विश्वपार परम से प्रभाचकाचार्य सूत्र शिशिमार इस्कॉन प्रतिष्ठा विविधि सांस्तव कचर वैष्णव श्रीरामनि गौर प्रियजन कृष्ण प्रेम भक्तिदात पतित पावन His divine grace अभय चरमिना भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी महाराज शील प्रभुपाद जी की जय. श्री गौरी गुरु वर्गापति उद्धार की जय. श्री रूप सनातन भक्त रघुनाथ श्री जीव गोपाल भक्त दास गुण सतगोस्वामी प्रभु की जय. नामाचार्य शील हरिदास ठाकुर जी की जय. अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय. प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्री गौर भक्त वृंद की जय. जय परम दयाल से नित्यानंद प्रभु की जय. जय प्रेम नाम संकीर्तन एक जनाक प्रेम पुरुषोत्तम श्री सच्चिदानंद स्मरण गौरंग चैतन्य महाप्रभु गौर हिमावरण अवतार की जय. गोलोकेर प्रमधानिनम संकीर्तन जगत की जय। जुग धर्म हरे कृष्ण महामंत्र की जय। प्रियपिंडांग ट्वेंजन त्रिभुग डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन सेवा की जय। श्री राधा नील माधव की जय। श्री राधा दामोदर की जय। शोध दामोदर की जय। समवेत भक्तबिंद की जय। निताय गौर हरि प्रेमानंदे हरि हरि बोल। All glory to the assembly bodies. All glory to the assembly bodies. All glory to Sri Guru Sri Gauranga.
नमस्ते नरसिंहाया
Namaste Narasimhaya.
नमस्ते नरसिंहाया
Namaste Narasimhaya.
प्रहलाद लाददायिने प्रहलाद लाददायिने हिरण्यकशिपुर्वक्षः शिलाटङ्कानखालये हितो नरसिंह परतो नरसिंह जतो जतो जामि ततो नरसिंह बाहिर नरसिंह हृदय नरसिंह नरसिंह मदेम शरणं प्रपदे तव कर कमलबरे नखां अद्भुत शृङ्गां दलिता हिरण्यकशिपु तनुभृङ्गा केशवधृता नरहरिरूप जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे केशवधृता नरहरिरूप जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय नरसिंहदेव जय नरसिंहदेव नरसिंहदेव जय नरसिंहदेव जय नर हरि जय नर हरि नर हरि जय नर हरि जय प्रहलाद महाराज प्रहलाद महाराज प्रहलाद महाराज जय प्रहलाद महाराज जय प्रभुपद 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 श्रील प्रभुपद निताय गौर हरि बोल निताय गौर हरि बोल नृसिंहदेव भगवान की जय प्रहलाद महाराज की जय जय श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय
श्री वृंदाई तुलसी बाई प्रिय केशव सत्य विष्णु भक्ति प्रदेवी सतवताय नमः नमः वृंदाई तुलसी बाई प्रिय केशव सत्य विष्णु भक्ति प्रदेवी सतवताय वृंदायै तुलसी बाई प्रिय केशव सत्य कृष्ण भक्ति प्रदेवी सतवताय जय श्रीमती तुलसी महारानी वृंद देवी की जय Young devotees from that side. Yeah. No, no, the message is yeah.
Oh, really? Is that
Yes. Oh my God, I don't know what to do. I had to point the finger, not good. But want to sing? Okay.
Namo Namaha Tulasi Krishna Preyasi Namo
Can I lift mic for
Namaha
her, please? Mic.
Tulasi Krishna Preyasi Namo Namaha
Tulasi Krishna Preyasi
Radha Krishna Seva Pavo Abhilasi
Radha Krishna Seva Pavo Abhilasi
Tumhara saran hoy Tara vancha purna hoy
Jai Tumhara Sharanam Aminayane.
Ei Nivedana daro sakiranu kata koro.
Eni Vedana Dara Sakirano Gatakara.
Seva adhikara diye koro nijadasi.
Sevayani Karani Karani Jadase.
Dina Krishna dase ko ei namora hoy.
Ina Krishna Dase Ko Enamora.
Shri Radha Govinda premi sada inapasi.
Sri Radha Govinda Premi Sadayana Dasi.
Shri Radha Govinda premi sada inapasi.
Shri Radha Govinda Premi Sadayana Dasi.
Yani kani cha papani brahma hatyadikani cha. Tani tani karnashyanti pradakshina pade pade.
Jani Kani Sapapani Brahmatari Kani Sa. Tani Tani Prana Santi Pradakshina Pade Pade.
Yani kani cha papani brahma hatyadikani cha. Tani tani karnashyanti pradakshina pade pade.
Jani Kani Sapapani Brahmatari Kani Sa. Tani Tani Prana Santi Pradakshina Pade Pade. Jani Kani
Sapapani brahma hatyadikani cha. Tani tani karnashyanti pradakshina pade pade.
Jani Kani Sapapani Brahmatari Kani. Tani Tani Prana Santi.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna,
Hari Bol.
Shri Vrindai Tulasi Debai Priya Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Pradi Devi Sattvatai Namah. Vrindai Tulasi Debai Priya Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Pradi Devi Sattvatai Namah. Vrindai Tulasi Devi Priya Kesava Satya Krishna Bhakti Pradi Devi Sattvatai Namah. Jai Shrimati Tulasi Maharani Vrinda Devi Ki Jai. O Tulasi, beloved Krishna, I bow before you again and again. My desire to obtain the service of Shri Radha and Krishna. Whoever takes shelter of you, his wish is fulfilled. Bestow your mercy upon him, you make him resident of Vrindavan. My desire is that you also grant me a residence in pleasure groves of Sri Vrindavan Dham. Thus, within my vision, I will always behold the beautiful pastimes of Radha and Krishna. I beg you to make me a follower, carry damsels of Raj. Please give me the privileged devotional service and make me your own maid servant. This very fallen and lowly servant of Krishna praise, may I always swim in love with Shri Radha and Govinda. Jai Shrimati Tulsi Maharani Vrinda Devi Ki Jai. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Shri Kastakam Ki Jai. Chaito Darpana Majanam Bhava Mahadavagni Vapanam Shri Akari Vachandrika Vitaranam Vidya Vadhu Jivanam Anandam Buddhi Vardhanam Pratipadam Purnamrita Swajanam Sarvatmasnam Parampara Vijayati Shri Krishna Sankirtanam Nam Namakari Gaudha Sakti Sarvashantis Tatrapita Niyamita Smarane Nakala Ita Dusitava Durgaivam Idisam Yajani Nanuragaha Trinadapi Sunichena Tarorapi Saishnuna Amani Namanadena Kirtaniya Sadahari Nadhanam na janam na sundarim Kavitam va jagarishaka maye Mama janmani janmanishwari Bhavata Nayanam galora shrudharaya Vadanam gadagada rudaya gira Pulakarinchitam bapu kada Tavanam agrahane bhavishyati Jugaitam nimishena Chakyusha prabhusaitam Sunya itam jagata sarvam Govinda virahe name Asli shavapadaраtam pinastumam Adarshanar marmahatam karotuva Jata tathava vidadhatu lampato Mat pranathastu saivana para Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Shri Kastakam Ki Jai Namo Mahavaranayo Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishna Krishna Chaitanya Namine Gaurati Namo Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamine Namine Namaste Saraswati Devam Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Satarine. Glory to the Sri Krishna Sankirtana, which cleanses the heart of all the dust accumulated for years and extinguishes the fire of conditional life of repeated birth and death. This Sankirtan moment is the prime benediction for humanity at large because it spreads the rays of the benediction moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss and enables us to fully taste the nectar for which all is anxious. O my Lord, your holy name alone can render all benediction to living beings, and thus you have hundreds and millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names, you have invested all the transcendental energies. There are not even hard and fast rules for chanting these names. O my Lord, out of kindness, you enable us to easily approach you by holy names, but I'm so unfortunate I have no attraction for them. One should chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than straw in the street. One should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respect to others. In such state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your causeless devotion and service, birth after birth. O Son of Maharaj Nanda Krishna, I am your eternal servitor. Yes, some or other, I am fallen in this ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms at your lotus feet. O my Lord, when will my eyes be decorated with tears of love flowing constantly when I chant your holy name? When will my voice choke up, and will the hairs of my body stand on end at the recitation of your name? O Govinda, feeling your separation, I am considering a moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I'm feeling all vacant in the world in your absence. I know no one but Krishna as my Lord, and he should remain so, even if he sandals me roughly by his embrace, or makes me broken-hearted by not being present before me. He is completely free to do anything and everything, for he is always my worshipful Lord, unconditionally. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Sikhastakam Ki Jai. There are 10 offenses in the matter of chanting the holy name of the Lord that should be avoided. They are as follows. 1. Blaspheme the devotees who dedicated the life for propagating the holy name of the Lord. 2. To consider the names of Shiva and Lord Brahma to be equal to or independent of the name Lord Vishnu. 3. To disobey the orders of the spiritual master. 4. To blaspheme the Vedic scriptures or scriptures in pursuance of Vedic version. 5. To consider the glories of chanting Hare Krishna to be imagination. 6. To give some interpretation to the holy name of the Lord. 7. To commit sinful activities on the strength of the Lord. 8. To consider chanting Hare Krishna as one of the auspicious ritualistic activities which often favors as fruitive activities, karma kanda. 9. To strike the faithless person by the glories of the holy name. And 10. To not have complete faith in chanting the holy names and to maintain material attachments even after understanding so many instructions in this matter. It also an offense to be inattentive while chanting. Every devotee who claims to be Vaishnava must carefully guard against these 10 offenses in order to quickly achieve the desired success, Krishna Prema. Now let us offer our most humble obeisances unto the Vaishnavas, devotees with the Lord. They are just like desired trees, they can fulfill the desires of everyone, and they are for the compassion of the fallen conditioned souls. Jevancha kalpatarubhyascha kaprasindhudevacha paritanam
Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Vaishnava Thakur Ki Jai.
Shri Guru Pranam Guru Mangala Charan Ki Jai.
Om Aganya Timirandasya Yananjana Sulakaya Chakuram Tanyana Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhustam Sapitam Yena Bhutali Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Jataha Pachikamalan Shri Gurun Vaishnavamsha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahaguna Ragunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parichana Sahitam Aitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahaguna Lalita Shri Vishaka Nimitam Sa Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Presta Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Itinamini Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paskatya Desatarine Namo Namsubhaya Krishna Presta Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Tinamine Shivarsavanavi Devi Daitaya Kripabdaye Krishna Sambandha Vijnana Dayane Prabhave Namaha Madhur Ujjvala Premadya Shri Rupanuga Bhaktida Shri Gaura Karuna Shakti Vigrahaya Namastate Namaste Gauravani Shri Murtaye Dinatarine Rupanuga Virudapa Abhasiddhanta Dvantaharine Namo Gaura Kishoraya Shakshadvaraya Murtaye Vipralambara Sambhunde Padambujayate Namaha Namo Bhakti Vinodaya Sachitanandanamine Gora Shakti Swarupaya Rupanuga Varayate Gora Vir Bhava Bhumestvam Nishdesta Sajjana Priya Vaishnava Sarvapoma Sri Jagannathaya Te Namaha Vanchakalpa Tarabhyascha Kripa Sindhubhye Bacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Padayate Krishna Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gurachase Namaha Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhakta Rupa Swarupakam Bhaktaram Bhaktavam Namami Bhakta Saktikam Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Jayatam Suratur Pangur Mama Manda Mater Gati Matsarva Swapadambo Jo Radha Madan Mohano Divya Drindaranya Kapadumadaha Shimad Ratnagara Simasanastito Shimad Radha Shila Govinda Devo Prestali Bihi Sevyamanam Smarami Shiman Rasa Rasarambi Vamsiva Tatatastita Karsan Venuswaner Gopir Gopinatak Striyeshtrana Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanastute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasudeva Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Shri Guru Pranama prayers. So we're going to continue now and finish this very special verse and purport explaining the difference between a Kanishta Adhikari, a Madhyamana Adhikari, and a topmost position of a devotee as a okay, anyway, it's Srimad Bhagavatam, 11th canto, 2nd chapter, 47th verse. So we stopped at the point where it says, according to Srila Jiva Goswami, since Kanishta Adhikari, the lowest level of devotee, who cannot properly respect other devotees, will certainly fall down to offer respects to ordinary living entities who are not even devotees. A Kanishta Adhikari is useless for practical preaching work unless he comes to a higher platform of understanding. Srila Jiva Goswami says, Iyam cha shradana shastrar tavadarana jata. Because the Kanishta Adhikari's faith is not actually based on the statements of Vedic literature, he cannot understand the exalted position of the Supreme Personality of Godhead within everyone's heart. Therefore, he cannot actually manifest love of Godhead, nor can he understand the exalted position of the devotees of the Lord. Krishna is so glorious that Krishna's intimate associates must also be glorious. But this is unknown to a Kanishta Adhikari. Similarly, the essential qualification of a Vaishnava, which is to offer all respects to others, amanina manadena kirtanya sadahari, is also conspicuous by its absence in a Kanista Adhikari. If such a person, however, has faith in the Vedic literatures and tries to understand the statements of Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, he will gradually be elevated to the second and first class stages of devotional service. Okay, so this is a real profile of what's called a Kanista Adhikari, a devotee on the lowest stage of devotional service. They're a devotee, they're engaged in devotional service, but they haven't fully understood the transcendental nature of Krishna and Krishna's devotees. So, because the Kanista Adhikari still has latent attraction to materialistic people. Latent means it's not overly manifested, it's within one's heart still. And they try and sometimes to glorify such people because they have no full understanding of who Krishna is and what are the symptoms of a pure devotee. Okay, so then now Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur makes the understanding of the difference between Kanista Adhikari and Madhyama Adhikari and Uttama Adhikari very, very clear. He says, he's being quoted by the author here, according to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, a Kanista Adhikari should very seriously engage in regulated worship of the deity. The deity is a particular incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Lord Krishna can present himself before the worshipper in 5 different manifestations, namely his original form as Krishna, which is called Para, his quadruple expansions, which are called Vyuha, his pastime incarnations, called Vaibhava, and the super soul called Antaryami, and the deity called Archa. Within the deity form, or Archa, is the super soul, who in turn is included within the Lord's pastime forms, called Vaibhava. The Supreme Lord's Vaibhava Prakasa. So there are 4 general categories. There's Prakasa and Vikasa, and there's also, Prakasa means completely the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then Vikasa means the Supreme Personality of Godhead with a few different differences in the bodily form. Like Balaram is the first expansion of Krishna. So he has a light complexion, but Krishna has a dark complexion. So there's a little difference right there. Balaram is Krishna. Is a plenary expansion. Plenary means complete expansion of Krishna. But there's a little difference in the bodily form. And then there's Narayana. Again, there's a little more visible difference. That is that Narayana has 4 arms, and Krishna only has 2 arms, right? That doesn't mean Narayana is greater than Krishna because he has 4 arms. It just means that he is an expansion of the Lord for particular purposes. So he's a plenary expansion. That means he has all the powers that Krishna has, but he does not play the flute. He has 4 arms instead of 2 arms. He doesn't dance with the gopis. So there are some little differences, and his function is a little bit different. There are millions and billions of the 4-armed forms of the Lord, and from the so you have what's called the first Chatur Vyuha, which is expansion from Balaram, of Vasudeva, Sankar's son, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha, and they are all four-armed forms, right? And then from that first Chaturvyuha, you have the first expansion of Narayana, who has four arms, right? And then, but there's not one Narayana, there's billions of them in the spiritual world, because there are billions of planets, billions, trillions of planets, the spiritual world. And Narayana is on every one of them in Vaikuntha. So we're gradually, this is called the hierarchy of Krishna and his expansions. This is a science. We have to learn this. We have to understand what it is. Otherwise, we'll be making many mistakes. And then, for the material creation, there's a second Chaturvyuha of Vasudeva, Sankar's son, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha, all four-armed forms. And that's expanded from Narayana. And then from Sankar's son in the second Chaturvyuha, you have the Vishnu expansions, Mahavishnu, Garbhodakshaya Vishnu, and Kshirodakshaya Vishnu. And so this Mahavishnu, he expands Garbhodakshaya Vishnu, and there are many, many Garbhodakshaya Vishnus, because Garbhodakshaya Vishnu enters into every molecule of the exhalation of Mahavishnu, and he enters into each one of those molecules of his breathing, and those are universes that are gigantic. And they're all. Our universe is relatively a small one. They're much, much bigger ones, and Garbhodakshaya Vishnu enters into them, and he fills half of the universe with the water, and the other half, he grows a lotus flower from his belly button, and it goes up, and there's a big stem, and then on top of the stem is a lotus flower, and that's then from Garbhodakshaya Vishnu's thoughts, he creates Lord Brahma, the first living entity. Now, Lord Brahma is a jiva, like us, and he's had previous lives, right? And he appears before the material creation has actually taken place, and it's going to take place within that stem of the lotus flower. But for the time being, Brahma is sitting there and he's confused. I mean, what is my purpose? What is my origin? He doesn't understand any of these things. So he goes through that stem, goes all the way down, and it's all dark and he doesn't see anything. So he comes back, and then he hears two syllables, tapa, and then because he had previous lives, he understands what it means. It means that, Brahma, you must do some austerity. So he begins to meditate. And after a very, very long time, very, very long time, he hears the flute of Krishna. And that illuminates his mind with understanding that his origin is Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then Krishna, being pleased with Brahma's austerities, or his tapasya, he reveals to him some parts of the spiritual world of Vaikuntha and also Goloka. And now Brahma becomes very, very enlightened, and then Krishna also teaches him how to begin the material creation and populate the universes with his universe with living entities. So he's the original Prajapati. So this is all, let's say, very, very transcendental knowledge. And to understand this, one must be purified of attachment to the material world. Therefore, it could take a long time before we actually understand all this, or at least try and grip it with our mind. This is amazing, unbelievably amazing things that are at the origin of the material world. Okay, so then Brahma becomes the number one Prajapati. Then he has sons who also create living entities, the different species, I mean, and then there are also wives and so forth, and then the material world becomes populated, and there's many, many universes, and there are many, many Brahmas in each universe. And our Brahma is a relatively small Brahma. He only has 4 heads. There are other Brahmas that have 1,000 heads, or many, many more heads, because the universes are more complicated, so it requires more brain power of the Brahmas. So we see this is like way beyond our conception of things. No one has ever explained this before. Nobody's imagination has been spread out so much that they could explain such a thing like this. But this is all very deeply and exactingly explained in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So, therefore, nowhere else will we be able to access this type of knowledge. It's definitely not there in the Bible. It's definitely not there in the Quran. It's definitely not there in the Torah. It's not in the Granth Sahib. It's not in the Buddhist writings. It's not in the Jain writings. There might be a little bit more in some of these scriptures, but not this complete explanation. Okay, so according to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, a Kanishta Adhikari should very seriously engage in regulated worship of the deity. The deity is a particular incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Lord Krishna can present himself before the worshipper in 5 different manifestations, namely his original form as Krishna, which is called Para, his quadruple expansions, that's the expansions of Vasudeva, Sankar's son, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha, and they're called Vyuha. And then his pastime incarnations, so that's like the Vishnu incarnations in the material world, and that's called Vaibhava. And then the Supersoul, that's the expansion of Kshirodakshayi Vishnu, who's is a source also of all the avatars that appear in the material world, and that's called Antaryami because he's within. There's so outside means Bahur.
Bahya.
Huh?
Bahya. Bahya means outside.
Yeah, Bahya, and then inside it means Antar. Yeah, so he's the indwelling Supreme Personality of Godhead that accompanies every living entity, all of us. All living entities, not just human beings, all living entities. And then there is the Archa, or the deity, in the temple. Within the deity form, or Archa, is the Supersoul, who in turn is included within the Lord's pastime forms, or the Vaibhava. The Supreme Lord's Vaibhava Prakasa is an emanation from the Chaturvyuha. This quadruple expansion of the Lord, or Chaturvyuha, is situated within the Supreme Truth, Vasudeva, who himself is situated within the Swayam Prakasa Tattva. This Swayam Prakasa consists of expansions of the ultimate Swayam Rupa Tattva, the original form of Krishna within Goloka Vrindavana in the spiritual sky. Whoa, this is a big statement here, right? And this just gives us an idea now of the importance of the deity that we're seeing every day. This deity, if it's properly installed, which it was, is the sum total of Krishna and all his expansions, all his plenary expansions, and partial plenary expansions, and partial plenary expansions. So, just to give us an idea how powerful Krishna is. And then plus, there are his separated expansions, which are us, the jivas. And then more than that, there's the whole material nature. All of this is expanded from Krishna, and through this whole hierarchical structure of Krishna, then Balaram, then the first Chaturvyuha, then the Narayana forms, and the second Chaturvyuha, and then the Vishnu forms, and then the demigods, and then the jivas, and then from Shirodaksha Vishnu expansions of avatars within the material world, and so forth. It's bewildering, the magnitude of all this, right? But it's a fact. And there's not just one universe. There's an infinite number of material universes, and all of those put together hardly represent 1/4 of Krishna's, let's say, powers and expansions. The 3/4 is in the spiritual world, and 3/4 of all living entities are in the spiritual world. We're in a small minority. This is all unbelievable. It's way beyond our capacity to comprehend it. But if we engage in devotional service, then Krishna helps us to comprehend it, at least to the limit of our understanding, which is like 78%, right? That's like the limit that we can achieve as far as understanding Krishna. But that's already a lot, right? So most people are down on 1% or 0.5%. But devotees can go up to the level of Brahma of 78% understanding of the Lord. Okay, so now let me read that again because it's a big statement. It says, according to Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, a Kanista Adhikari should very seriously engage in regulated worship of the deity. And this is what we recommend for all our devotees, especially grihastas. This is highly recommended because it teaches one to be regulated, teaches one to be clean, and it teaches one to have full veneration, and worship and faith in the deity, which is the sum total, of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna or Swayam Rupa, the original form of the Lord, and then Balaram, then the first Chaturvyuha, then Narayana, then the second Chaturvyuha, and then the Vishnu incarnations, etc., all together in the deity. Now we have a different idea of what we're dealing with. It's not just a statue, as most people think, or an idol. I mean, Hindus refer to the deities all the time as idols. See? It just shows how they've been misled completely. They're not idols. They're actually the whole gamut of Krishna and his hierarchy standing right there and begging us to please offer service so that we can purify ourselves and go back to Godhead. See? So we should have utmost respect and veneration for the deity of Radha and Krishna and all the different forms of the Lord that we're worshiping. It's Sitaram, Lakshman, Hanuman, Lakshmi Shingadev, and Jagannath Subhadra Baladev, Gaur Nitai, and then the unparalleled devotees like Tulsi Devi, and then of course Srila Prabhupada and the Acharyas. This has to be clearly understood in order to make spiritual advancement. Okay, so he says, the deity is a particular incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Lord Krishna can present himself before the worshipper in 5 different manifestations, namely his original form as Krishna, which is called Para, his quadruple means 4, expansions, Vyuha, so 4, Vasudeva, Sankar's son, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha. Now, to understand that, it requires more explanation. We're not going to go today. We will go deeply into what does this mean, Vasudeva and Sankarshan and Pradyumna and Aniruddha. And then, and we'll see, once we do that, you'll see that Sankaracharya, when he wrote the Sarirabhasa, he scrambled the understanding of the Chaturvyuha in order to get to this point that the whole material creation is false, it's an illusion, and that the absolute truth is impersonal, and that the whole Mayavad philosophy is based on the way he juggles meanings of these fundamental things like the Chaturvyuha. Okay, so it says, his quadruple expansions, Vyuha, his pastime incarnations, Vaibhava, the supersoul, Antaryami, and the deity, Archa. Within the deity form, or Archa, is the supersoul, who in turn is included within the Lord's pastime form, Vaibhava. And the Supreme Lord's Vaibhava Prakasha is an emanation from the Chaturvyuha, who himself, this quadruple expansion of Lord is situated within the Supreme Truth, Vasudeva, who himself is situated within the Swayam Prakasa Tattva. This Swayam Prakasa consists of expansions of the ultimate Swayam Rupa Tattva, the original form of Krishna within Goloka Vrindavana in the spiritual sky. So the Swayam Rupa Tattva, or Krishna's original form, holding the flute and three-bending form, is the source of all these emanations, all these expansions. Now, even Devaki and Vasudeva didn't understand that. They were convinced that Narayana is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and that this little boy that appears with 4 arms, they didn't want to see him because they thought Krishna is appearing in his original form as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Kamsa will definitely kill him. So then they prayed, especially Devaki prayed, please change your form to look like an ordinary kid. So then Krishna changes his form into his 2-arm form, but she doesn't realize that this is the original form of God from which the Balaram, the first Chaturvyuha, the Narayana come. Right? So she's in Yogamaya, or Yogamaya illusion, so that she can actually act in the role as his mother, as Krishna's mother, and sometimes chase him, sometimes catch him, sometimes tie him up, sometimes scold him. Otherwise, it's impossible. She would not be able to have those feelings, motherly feelings for him. She knew that he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, in the spiritual world, there is a type of illusion, but it's Yogamaya who protects Krishna, and secondly, helps devotees come closer to Krishna, intimately. Without that, if they're all convinced that he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they couldn't have these intimate relationships with him, right? Spontaneous, intimate relationships. Okay, so now we're beginning to understand the depth of, the profound depth of who this Archa Vigraha is, right? It is the full gamut of Krishna's expansions all in one, right? It's not just a piece of marble or a piece of wood. It's much, much more than that. Okay, so then to continue, this hierarchy of the expansions of the Supreme Lord in the spiritual world is realized even within the material world in terms of one's eagerness to render service to the Lord. So the more we're eager to serve Krishna, the more we can understand the Archa Vigraha, or the deity form, in the temple. It is not an idol. It is not a piece of marble or wood. This is the whole gamut of Krishna's expansions in one. And if we begin to understand that, we become purified, and we're no longer enamored by materialistic so-called great people and their so-called great achievements, building rockets and bombs and tanks and machine guns and poison gases and things like that. We're no longer neither intimidated by it or in any way in awe of it, And then they build these gigantic high-rises and bridges and tunnels and trains and cars and all these things, And they said, well, look at what we've done. Yeah, what have you done? You ruined the environment. That's what you've done. And you have wars where thousands and millions of people die. That's what you've done with all these so-called advancements. And you just make gadgets that proliferate radiation and other things that ruin people's health. And you ruin the air quality by all your gadgets with all the different emanations from them, like the exhaust of cars and the exhaust of airplanes. One airplane ride is equal to thousands of cars' exhausts. So when Al Gore, I call him Igor. Igor's the name of a demon. But when Al Gore takes a flight to go to Europe and talk about the climate and things like that, he has done more damage to the climate than hundreds of cars' exhaust, right? So, but of course, they don't talk about that. Okay, so now here, this hierarchy of the expansions of the Supreme Lord in the spiritual world is realized even within the material world in terms of one's eagerness to render service to the Lord. A beginner in the lowest stage of devotional service should try to dedicate all his or her activities to the satisfaction of the Lord and cultivate the worship of Krishna in the temple. There it is. So we should all be excited to be able to become Brahminically qualified so we can actually personally serve the deity. Now, we're serving the deity by washing the dishes. We're serving the deity by cooking. We're serving the deity by cleaning the temple. We're serving the deity by going out on Sankirtan. No doubt about it. But you can also serve the deity intimately by bathing the deity and singing for the deity, dancing for the deity, offering food, bhoga, to the deity, cooking for the Lord, dressing the Lord, and so forth, and putting jewelry on the Lord, making flower garlands for the Lord. All these things are part of dedication of all our activities to the satisfaction of the Lord and cultivate the worship of Krishna in the temple. So according to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, all the plenary expansions of the Supreme Lord mentioned above descend into this world and enter within the deity. So all what we just explained, the Swayam Rupa, the Vaibhava, and the Antaryami, and the Archa, and the Vyuha, it all expands into the deity in the temple. Although the Vaibhava or pastime expansions of the Lord incarnate at specific times, Ramadi Murti Sukala Niyamena Tistan, that's a verse from the Brahma Samhita, the supersoul and the deity forms are constantly available for the spiritual advancement of the devotees in this world. So we all are carrying in our heart the Paramatma, and also we can see every day the deity. So the supersoul and the deity forms are constantly available for the spiritual advancement of the devotees in this world. As one comes to the Madhyama Adhikari platform, one is able to understand the expansions of the Supreme Lord, whereas the Kanishta Adhikaris' entire knowledge of the Lord is limited to the deity. In other words, he respects the deity, he or she respects the deity, that doesn't really respect the devotees. And therefore, such a person's understanding of the deity is stunted. And such a person's devotional service is very limited. And they're definitely not able to preach and convince people to become devotees. Nonetheless, Krishna is so kind that to encourage even the lowest class of Vaishnavas, he condenses all his various forms into the deity, so that by worshipping the deity, the Kanishta Adhikari devotee is worshipping all the forms of the Lord. As the devotee makes advancement, he can understand these forms as they appear in their own way, both within this world and in the spiritual sky. So by worshipping the deities, even if one is on the lowest level, if they are humble and if they follow the regulative principles and they chant their rounds and also worship the deity, they will eventually become purified and understand the full, let's say, spectrum of the deity's, let's say, nature. As long as one remains on the third-class platform, one has no transcendental appreciation of the blissful reality of the Supreme Lord's paraphernalia and entourage. So what are the Supreme Lord's paraphernalia? It's like his the jewelry on his body, and the different markings on his body. Those are paraphernalia. The Kaustuba jewel and the peacock feather and the different marks on the bottom of his feet. All these things are paraphernalia of the Lord. The way he's dressed and the way he holds his flute. These are all paraphernalia of the Lord. So it says here that the Kanishta Adhikari is limited to the deity. Nonetheless, Krishna is so kind that to encourage even the lowest class of Vaishnavas, he condenses all of his various forms into the deity, so that by worshipping the deity, the Kanishta Adhikari devotee is worshipping all the forms of the Lord. And that's a major statement there. As the devotee makes advancement, he can understand these forms as they appear in their own way, both within the world and in the spiritual sky. That's a wonderful statement. And then, as long as one remains on the third-class platform, one has no transcendental appreciation of the blissful reality of the Supreme Lord's paraphernalia and entourage. So we explained what some of the paraphernalia is. Now, the entourage are the devotees that are always with the Lord. And in Goloka, that's the Gopas and the Gopis. And Nanda Maharaj and Yasodamai and Vasudeva and Devaki and all the wives all the wives of Krishna, beginning with Rukmini, and in Dwarka, and then all the people in Mathura. So we see this is called the entourage. These people are always with Krishna. So by worshiping the deity and pleasing the Lord, one can develop this transcendental appreciation of the blissful reality of Supreme Lord's paraphernalia and entourage. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was very pleased with King Pratrapurudra when the king, upon receiving an outer cloth from the Lord, immediately installed it as a deity and began to worship it as being as good as the Lord himself. So that's a paraphernalia of the Lord. His chadar, he gave it personally to King Prataparudra. And that whole episode's in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. And then he worshipped it because it's the paraphernalia of the Lord. Any paraphernalia of the Lord is also worshipable. Right? And Lord Chaitanya was very pleased that he did this. And he began to worship it as being as good as the Lord himself. Lord Shiva himself has stated, Tasmat parataram devi tadiyanam chanam. Worship of the paraphernalia, entourage, or devotees of the Lord is even better than worship of the Lord, because the Lord is more pleased by worship of his devotees and entourage than by worship of himself personally. That's a huge statement, and it's a fact. In the Padma Purana, Parvati asked Lord Shiva, said, well, who is the best person to worship? She was waiting for him to say, me. He didn't say that. He said, he made this statement, Tasmat parataram devi tadiyanam samachara. That the best worship is to worship the devotee or anything in relationship with Krishna. So we worship Govardhan. Now, why should we worship a mountain? Because we know that Govardhan is not different than Krishna. He manifested that, he showed it, right? And then we worship the Govardhan Shilas, the stones that are on the mountain, because it's paraphernalia of the Lord. And we also worship Srila Prabhupada. He's a pure devotee of the Lord. We don't worship him like that he's the supreme absolute personality of Godhead, but he's the supreme surrendered devotee to the supreme absolute truth personality of Godhead, and therefore he's as good as the Lord. Therefore he should be given the same respect that we give to Krishna. And Krishna is more pleased when we worship Prabhupada than if we worship him. See? So, therefore he says that worship of the paraphernalia, entourage, or devotees of the Lord is even better than worship of the Lord, because the Lord is more pleased by worship of his devotees and entourage than by worship of himself personally. According to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura, the inability of the Kanistha Adhikari to appreciate the Lord's devotees, entourage, and paraphernalia indicates that such a materialistic Vaishnava is still affected by the speculative understanding of the Karmavadis and the Mayavadis. So who are the Karmavadis? They believe that they're the, you would call the, I'll say it in a second. They believe that the law of karma is supreme, that even Krishna, although he creates the laws of karma, then he steps back and they take over. And therefore, if you follow, their belief is if you follow the laws of karma, then you will be liberated from the cycle of birth and death. That's not exactly true. Yeah, you'll definitely be elevated spiritually by following the laws of karma, but you won't be liberated because one can only be liberated by pure love of Krishna. And if you think that Krishna has nothing to do with the material world, he doesn't touch it, but he is in control of it, including the laws of karma. Right? And therefore, he can reverse them if he wants to. Like, for example, when Arjuna had made a vow that if he didn't kill this one person who killed his son, Ashwatthama, then he would commit suicide. So Duryodhana heard about this. So the next day in battle, they organized things so that Arjuna could not go anywhere near the son of Lord Ashwatthama. And so Arjuna was very forlorn, and Krishna said, "What's the matter?" At the end of the battle, it's when the sun goes down, the battle's over, right? They have to stop fighting. And Arjuna, he said, "Well, I made this vow, and now I have to commit suicide." So Lord Krishna said, "Just get your bow and arrow ready." And Arjuna said, "What for?" He said, "No, because you're going to kill the person you said you would kill." He said, "Okay, it's not Ashwatthama, it's somebody else." Yeah, what's the name? Yeah, Jayadratha, yeah. So Arjuna got ready, and then all of a sudden the sun came back, right? And then he shot the arrow and killed him, right? And he didn't have to commit suicide. So now Krishna can change things if he wants, but he's the supreme controller. So, and there are many instances like that where Krishna, to protect his devotee, just like when Bhismadev broke the chariot of Arjuna and was harassing him terribly and was on the verge of killing him, Krishna broke his promise and took one of the wheels of the chariot that was broken and started spinning it like the chakra and ran towards Bhisma to kill him. And Bhisma said, see, now I know for sure you made this promise, but you broke it because you love your devotee, right? So there was a transcendental pastime. But we see how Krishna can reverse everything. Like, for example, how are all these big planets held in perfect orbits in the universe? And there's millions of planets, or so-called stars or whatever. How are they all kept in perfect? They never collide with each other, right? That's Krishna's potency. He's controlling the whole thing. And when you see this, people like Einstein and Isaac Newton and others, they're just overwhelmed. It's, how is this happening? It's unbelievable that, all these gigantic planets are in perfect synchronization. And we keep our time according to their movements. And they're perfect movements. So it's unbelievable. And therefore people are just in awe. Right? But that's Krishna's unlimited potencies. So therefore it says here that Srila Prabhupada often said that only the impersonalist desires to see Krishna alone. Only the impersonalist desires to see Krishna alone. We, the Vaishnavas, desire to see Krishna with his cows, his friends, his parents, his gopis, his flute, his jewelry, the forest scenery, and so on. Krishna is gorgeous in the setting of Vrindavan. It is in the land of Vrindavana that Lord Krishna, surrounded by so many beautiful associates, manifests his exalted, indescribable beauty. Similarly, the unique mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is exhibited in the activities of his pure devotees who selflessly travel around the universe, distributing the dust particles from Krishna's lotus feet on the heads of the conditioned souls. One who is uninterested in the Lord's paraphernalia, entourage, and devotees has a stunted conception of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This must be due to contamination from the impersonal and sensuous understandings of life. Sensuous understandings of life, we're talking about nonsense people that engage in sense gratification, and the impersonalists, they are the Mayavadis that say that the concept of God is not personal, it's impersonal. So, therefore, this is a major statement. The devotees, they're interested not in Krishna alone, as the impersonalists may be, but they desire to see Krishna with his cows, his friends, his parents, his gopis, his flute, his jewelry, the forest scenery in the forest of Vrindavan, and so on. And Krishna is gorgeous in the setting of Vrindavana. It is in the land of Vrindavana that Lord Krishna, surrounded by so many beautiful associates, manifests his exalted, indescribable beauty. So now we see what is the difference between a Kanishta Adhikari and a Madhyama Adhikari and Uttama Adhikari. The Kanishta Adhikari is still attracted to things in the material world and to so-called successful people in the material world, and their achievements, and therefore his or the advancement, spiritual advancement, is stunted. It's stopped. It's what you would call stopped from growing. It's not progressive anymore. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur states that after hundreds of lifetimes of faithfully worshipping the deity of Lord Vasudeva, or Krishna, with external paraphernalia, one realizes the true nature of his transcendental name and mantras, and the bondage of one's materialistic mentality slackens. In other words, as you understand more about Krishna, then your attachment to the material world becomes less and less. In this way, as a Kanishta Adhikari, meaning the devotee on the lowest level of spiritual advancement, gradually comes to perceive the mental activities of a devotee, and tries seriously to advance to a higher stage. Now, what are the mental activities of a devotee? Well, it's what's going on here between the two ears, right? So, outside, you might be chanting Hare Krishna or worshiping the deity, but inside you could have a whole nightclub in there. You can have a continual bhangra and orgy going on in your brain, right? So until that is cleaned up, one will be still attached to the material world. And you see that the mind is the central, let's say, organ where most people live, and most of their time is spent. And we've read this in the 6th chapter, 5th verse of Bhagavad Gita. Let's read it again. It says, "It is stressed herein that the mind must be so trained that it can deliver the conditioned soul from the mire or the filth of ignorance. In material existence, one is subjected to the influence of the mind and the senses. In fact, the pure soul is entangled in the material world because the mind is involved with the false ego, which desires to lord it over material nature." So this is why we're in the material world. We develop this desire to be dominator and to control some part of material nature, or try and control all of material nature, like Hiranyakashipu and Ravana. They wanted to control everything, right? And most people, they want to control some part of it and have some area where they have absolute control over some people and material assets. So this desire to dominate something in the material world is what keeps us in the material world. And it's the desire that contaminated our love for Krishna and brought us down from the spiritual world into the material world, where we try and act like a little god and have our own little kingdom. It can be a house and a family, or it can be a big company like Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos, and you're controlling thousands and thousands of people's lives, and you're producing all kinds of junk products like Teslas, and they're all junk products because they're made out of junk, and they end up in the junkyard, right? You want to see all the cars in the junkyard? They were all beautiful cars at one time, and now they're junk. So actually, all they do is manufacture junk. For some short time, it looks like it's a wonderful machine, but then it ends up in the junkyard, right? And then it contaminates the environment. So therefore, the devotee loses the attraction to the junk, and the biggest junk is in the mind. Memories of sense gratification, and memories of desires that have not been fulfilled, and memories of all the pornography, this thing and that thing that one has seen, and all that appears before in devotee's mind at the moment of death, right before death. All these things appear in one's mind because they were meditating on these things throughout life. That's why it's important to fix the mind on Krishna and meditate on Krishna's transcendental pastimes and have desires to please Krishna. Otherwise, we'll have all these other desires and all these other images of things that we've done or seen in sense gratification through our life. And that's what we'll see at the moment of death. And therefore, you take birth again. It all depends on our consciousness at the moment of death and our karma that we have performed during life. So it says, in fact, the pure soul is entangled in the material world because the mind is involved with the false ego, which desires to lord it over material nature. Therefore, the mind should be trained so that it will not be attracted by the glitter of material nature. And in this way, the conditioned soul may be saved. One should not degrade oneself by attraction to sense objects. The more one is attracted to sense objects, the more one becomes entangled in material existence. So that's a law of karma right there. The more one is attracted to sense objects, the more one is entangled in the material existence. The best way to disentangle oneself is to always engage the mind in Krishna consciousness. There it is. Okay, so if we don't control the mind, then we are going to have a very dark experience in the material world, and will be forced to take birth over and over and over again, many, many times, in different species. And we won't even have a human form of life, because human form of life is specifically meant for self-realization, to understand our relationship with Krishna. If we spend a whole lifetime just eating, sleeping, and mating, the next life we'll get an animal or less than animal, insect or something like that body. Because we don't need the human body. We didn't use it when we had it for its purpose. Its purpose was not to go to the nightclub and drink and smoke and engage in sense gratification. That's not the purpose of life. The purpose of life is to get liberated from the cycle of birth and death, go back to Godhead where we came from. Okay, so then we'll finish this, and then we won't have to go over it again tomorrow. So it says, Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Thakur states that after hundreds of lifetimes of faithfully worshiping the deity of Lord Vasudeva with external paraphernalia, one realizes the true nature of his transcendental name and mantras, and the bondage of one's materialistic mentality slackens. In this way, a Kanishta Adhikari gradually comes to perceive the mental activities of a devotee and tries seriously to advance to a higher stage. His materialistic conceptions will go away from on their own accord. He then exhibits loving service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead and makes friendship with the devotees who are the dearmost sons of the Lord, and by appreciating the universal quality of devotional service to Krishna, he becomes very much eager to engage other innocent people in the service of the Lord. Further, as he begins to make significant advancement, he becomes inimical to anything or anyone that hinders the progress of his devotional life, and thus he avoids atheistic people who cannot benefit by good instruction. The International Society for Krishna Consciousness, founded by His Divine Grace, Om Vishnupada Paramahansa Parivrajacharya 108 Sri Srimad Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, is so nice that anyone who helps this society immediately engages in preaching work for the Lord. Thus, there is great facility for the members of this society to come quickly to the second-class stage of devotional service. If in the name of Krishna consciousness one gives up preaching and instead becomes interested simply in collecting funds for maintenance, he is showing a type of envy of other living entities. This is a symptom of the third-class platform, according to Srila Vishwanatha Chakravarti Thakur. Verses 45 through 47 constitute the answer to King Nimi's two questions. What is the nature of devotional service to the Lord, and what are the specific duties of the Vaishnava? Srila Prabhupada ki jai. We should meditate on this last paragraph very seriously, right? And try and understand what he's saying. Okay, we'll stop right there. Are there any questions?
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj, there was one passage where, let me just, because it talks about how the deity, which is the sum total of all the plenary expansions, exhibits the activities of super soul in the lives of a devotee. Can you
Yes.
elaborate? I mean, does it mean like the devotee, basically the deity is influencing through Paramatma and the heart, or?
Well, we see it when we engage in what would be called preaching work. And when we're preaching, we can see the hand of the Supersoul helping us to find the right words to explain things and helping others to be inspired by what's being said or not be inspired by it. So we see that when a person is not at all interested in hearing about Krishna, that means that Yamaraj has a very strong grip on them and is not letting them because they've committed too many sins. When we see a person who right away says, I'm interested in this, please tell me more, that person has done many favorable things in previous life and in this life, and therefore they have an interest, and therefore the super soul is inspiring them to, now's your chance, now take it, right? So, but in the case of someone who says, I'm not interested at all in this, well, it's because they've committed too many sinful activities, and the super soul is giving such people forgetfulness. So we see the super soul's activity every day through going out and preaching to people. And then we understand, that we're not the doer, that everyone is under the grip of the super soul's, let's say, mercy. And mercy is shown in both ways, whether one is enthusiastic to be Krishna conscious or one is not enthusiastic. Why is that? Because when a person has committed too many sins, then in previous life and in this life, they have no taste for Krishna consciousness. It's zero. And therefore, they have to be put back into the process of reward and punishment for them to wake up, and it's going to be mostly punishment, right, by the laws of material nature. And these laws are insurmountable. They're supernatural laws. The goodness, passion, and ignorance are forces. They're supernatural forces that control the activities of all living entities. No one is independent. No one is free of these influences. So you see, sometimes people have a certain agenda, like, Putin has an agenda to conquer Ukraine, but he's having a very difficult time doing it, right? Whereas previously, he easily conquered Georgia, or at least part of Georgia, and it took a lot of property, land away from Georgia. But he's not able to do what he did easily before because he's committed too many sins, right? So that frustration, and now he has also cancer and he has Parkinson's disease, and so he's on the way down, right? So that means that he's not independent. He's under the control, under the grip of the laws of material nature because he's committed too many sins, right? You can't get away with these things. So you can see when it says that Krishna is the source of knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness, right? So therefore, you can see it actually working, and that's coming from the super soul, right?
Yeah, I think specifically, like I think the statement here is all the plenary expansions of the Supreme Lord mentioned about descend into this world and enter within the deity, who exhibits the function of the super soul by accompanying the daily life of the Vaishnava. So, obviously, the Paramatma is within, but also the deity is representing the Paramatma in that case. Is that how we see this?
Well, the deity is the composite of Krishna, the Chaturvyuha, the Vishnu incarnations, all the pastime avatars, and it's all condensed into the deity, so that if you worship the deity, you're worshiping all of those expansions of the Lord, right, for your benefit, right? But if we still have attachment to the material world, then our advancement of worshiping deity is stunted. But as we give away or loosen our attachment to material things and completely surrender to the deity, then we get the full benefit. Right? So, yeah. Which paragraph is that in?
I think it's according to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. That's, I think.
Oh, see, okay. The inability of the Kanishta Adhikari to appreciate the Lord's devotees, entourage, and paraphernalia indicates that such a materialistic Vaishnava is still affected by the speculative understanding.
That's 2 paragraphs above that, Maharaj.
Oh, okay, so 2 paragraphs in.
So there should be another one that says.
So it says, whereas the Kanishta Adhikari entire knowledge of the Lord is limited to the deity. Nonetheless, Krishna is so kind that to encourage even the lowest class of Vaishnavas, he condenses all of his various forms into the deity, so that by worshipping the deity, the Kanistadikari devotee is worshipping all the forms of the Lord, and the devotee makes advancement. As the devotee makes advancement, he can understand these forms as they appear in their own way, both within this world and in the spiritual sky. So where's that statement?
It's, I don't know.
You don't know?
No, I know this, but maybe. So this is the, it says.
Okay, that's the previous page, right here.
Yes.
Yeah, all right, that's good.
And also, Maharaj, each temple has the different name for the deities. What's the significance and how's that?
Because Krishna has infinite expansions, so it's just a testament that Krishna is not just one thing, that he has an infinite number of expansions, and we went over it, right? So, and he has different names according to the different activities that he engages in. So you have the Vishnu Sahasranam and Sotram, there's all different names of the Lord based on the different activities of the Lord. Yeah. And it's not just 1,008 names. I mean, there's infinite things because the Lord is engaged in infinite activities. So he's not limited to 1,008 names. Right? Haribol. Okay, we'll stop there and we'll continue. Yeah, okay.
One quick question, Maharaj. The Lord Venkateshwara in Tirumala is deemed to be like Srinivas himself turned into the deity, and versus the deities we worship. They typically from the Shastras should be considered equal.
No,
but
look,
want to hear your opinion on
that
this.
We're worshiping is the sum total of Krishna and his expansions. So it's not that, when Srinivas came into the material world, he was looking for Lakshmi, right?
Yeah.
And eventually, when Ananta Alvar, he goes to worship the Lord because no one was worshiping the Lord on a regular basis. And then he was building a pond, and his wife had to carry, in a basket some dirt and take it somewhere else. So Srinivas comes out of this little shack that was his so-called temple. It was just a little wooden shack, right? And he appears as a young cowherd boy, and he tries to help the wife carry the basket of dirt, right? Because she was pregnant, and when Ananta Alvar sees him, he said, "Who are you? What are you trying to do here?" And he chases him, and he throws an iron bar at him, and in order to save a cow from being hit by that iron bar, Srinivas takes the hit on his head, and then he disappears into the hut, the wooden hut. And then when Ananta Alvar goes into the hut to find him, he sees the deity of Srinivas. Then he realized that little boy was actually the deity. So when you said he enters into the deity, right? But it's not that he's entering in the deity. He's none different than a deity. Right? And he can walk, he can talk if he wants to, and he also can take what you would call the injury in order to protect the cow. So these are all transcendental pastimes of the Lord with his devotees. Right? So but that doesn't mean that there's a difference between Balaji and any other deity. What's being said here, that the deity is the sum total of all these expansions of the Lord and the Lord himself in his original form. Therefore, when you're worshiping the Archa Vigraha here in the temple, you're worshiping all these forms at the same time. Haribol. Okay, let's have Guru Puja. Actually, I have to go. I have to take the truck to Les Schwab, 8 o'clock.
Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakati Sadma Bandhamui Savadana Mate Jahara Prasade Bhai Ye Baba Turiya Jai Krishna Prapti Hoy Jai Ha Hote Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chitete Koriya Kya Harana Kori Ho Mani Asha Shri Guru Charani Rati Yesya Uttama Gati Ye prasade pure sarvahasha. चक्षुदान दिलो जे जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से दिव्य ज्ञान हृदय प्रकाशितो प्रेम भक्ति जहाँ होते अविद्या विनाश जाते विधि गाय जहारा चरितो श्री गुरु करुणा सिंधु आदम जे नारा बंधु लोके ना लोकेरा जीवाना आह प्रभु कोरो दोया देह मोरे पादा छाया बेजास गुसुक त्रिभुवाना श्रील प्रभुपाद पतिता पावाना जय प्रभुपादा जय प्रभुपादा जय प्रभुपादा जय प्रभुपादा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा नमो ॐ विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेसाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी नित्यानामिने नमस्ते सरस्वती देवी गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेषा शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यादिशतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nityai Gaura Hari Bol.
Purified by the words of the from his lotus mouth. He opens my darkened eyes and fills my heart with the transcendental knowledge. He is my Lord, birth after birth. From him ecstatic prema emanates. By him ignorance is destroyed. The Vedic scriptures sing of his character. Our spiritual master is the ocean of mercy, the friend of the poor, and the master of the devotees. O Master, be merciful unto us. Give us the shade of your lotus feet. Your fame is spread all over the three worlds. We take the shelter of the lotus feet. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.